What you call that noise?
The XTC Podcast.
XTClimelight.com.
What do you call that noise?
What do you call that noise?
It's the music we've been awaiting for a decade, and now it's out. Stu Rowe, Jen Olive and Andy Partridge have gone public with the three Clubmen, and their very, very wonderful eponymous 4-track EP is released at the end of June. But with three such gifted musicians to choose from, what's a humble podcaster to do? There can be only one answer. 3 podcasts. My name is Mark Fisher, and I'm delighted to welcome you back to What Do You Call That Noise, the XTC podcast, and the first of a trilogy of interviews. To mark the arrival of Aviatrix, Racecar, Green Green Grasshopper, and Look at Those Stars, the podcast is briefly turning from monthly to weekly. In today's episode, we'll hear from Stu Rowe. Next week, we'll be back with Jen Olive, and set your watches for 2 weeks' time when Andy Partridge will be our guest. But just to tease you a little more, it's time first for our regular feature in which you, the listeners, entertain us with your XTC-inspired songs. Since the start of the year, we've heard wonderful songs from John Bicknell, Warren Butson, Christopher Underwood and Jeff Nicholson, who last month brought us the awfully noisy Drink and Dance. Now it's the turn of Joel Bell to tell us about his song House Not House, which he recorded in the late 1980s.
What do you call that noise?
XTC modeled how a song could be both brokenhearted and energetic, and that really appealed to my sensibilities. The songs were harmonic, dense with images, and charged ahead like a ballad on steroids. How did they do that? Pack so much, so well into one song? And more importantly, could I figure out how to do it as well? One way I learned was to just rewrite or steal the bits off XTC records I could manage to play. What I also loved was that XTC wasn't rooted in rock idioms from the get-go. The songs weren't arranged around a bluesy guitar hook. Andy validated that you could sing over anything with a tone. Jason and the Argonauts churns over a piano scale. And for Me and the Wind, the verses are barked over a, what the hell is that riff anyway? They were, as Andy pointed out, really a pop band. Cribbing from XTC, I found a blueprint I could follow. Stumble over a musical motif that makes you feel something, and then find a melody and a hook, if you can. House Not House wears its influence proudly, falling somewhere between Jason and the Argonauts and Take This Town. It also treats romantic failure as a highbrow Zen Buddhist concept, the thing, no thing. I was fond of that. There's a number of obvious XTC-isms in this track, the snare on the fore-and of the bar, the exaggerated toms, rubbery bass, and a tumbling chromatic vocal melody that's kind of barky. This demo, for good or ill, wears the sonics of the late 80s, when my pal and I worked with what we had, a 4-track tape recorder and various machines. From 1986 to 1989, there's a few dozen demos we made that were clearly plundered from XTC as we were finding our own particular style, and a few are online if anyone wants to hear them. Thanks for listening. Thanks for all you do, Mark.
He has got the strangest vision as he watches television all alone. The couch and weary comes a sentence slightly blurry, not my home. It's a glass, not glass. It's a couch, not couch. It's a chair, not chair. And all we used to share in a house, not house. House, not house. Somewhere in the house is lurking Ragged Ann and Andy smirking hand in hand. In the bathroom mirror comes a picture, now it's clearer, understand. It's a towel, not towel. It's a brush, not brush. It's a tub, not tub. And where we used to rub in a house, not house. House, not house. Do you think I'm falling down? It's us, not us. Don't even wanna fuss about a house, not house. House, not house. He has got the great sensation, objects changing in relationships, don't care. He remembers buying dishes, every plate, 1,000 wishes lying there. It's a stove, not stove, and it's you, not you, and it's a sink, not sink. Don't even wanna think about a house, not house. House, not house. I'm not looking through your empty closet, but I bought you that dress and you don't wear it. I'm not looking through your empty closet, but I bought you that dress and you don't wear
Thank you very much, Joel Bell. You can hear more of Joel's XTC influenced tracks on his SoundCloud page, which I'll include in the podcast information. If you're a musician and you've written something inspired by XTC in some way, I'd love to hear from you. Your music doesn't necessarily have to sound like XTC, although it could do, but perhaps it has some lyrical, thematic, rhythmic, or melodic connection. If you've got something that fits the bill, please get in touch with me at mark@xtclimelight.com. My monthly shout out is briefly becoming a weekly shout out to the very wonderful supporters on Patreon whose donations keep the XTC podcast running. It would be great if you would join them. Just go to patreon.com/Mark Fisher and decide whether you'd like to be a pink thing, a humble daisy, or a knight in shining karma. If it's the latter, I'll read out your name at the end of each episode. And if you have an appetite for even more XTC, and of course you do, remember you can buy a copy of What Do You Call That Noise? An XTC Discovery book at xtclimelight.com. Okay, so if you hang around another week, you'll be able to hear Jen Olive saying,
When it comes to music, being in the studio, you can't really do better. Andy's got, and Stu as well, they've got like big ears, you know, they can hear the grass grow. There's nothing that they can't hear, so you can send them anything.
and if you have the patience to wait 2 weeks, you can hear Andy Partridge saying,
Somebody normal, inverted commas, here's their, and they may sing like that, but you give that to Jen and she may sing like that. And it comes back a totally different feel. And you think, that is great. Why didn't I hear it like that? Why didn't I hear it wrong like that? Because wrong is so much more thrilling.
But first, it's my privilege to welcome the multi-talented Stu Rowe, mixer, producer, guitarist, bassist and keyboard player who has worked with Andy Partridge on Monstrance and Gonewards, with Colin Moulding and Terry Chambers on the Great Aspirations EP and the TC&I live gigs, with Barry Andrews on 4 Shriekback albums, with Jen Olive on the breaks, and pretty much any Swindon musician you can care to name. So, Stu, welcome to the podcast. Tell us about the genesis of the 3 Clubmen.
It's a long story, this one. So me and Andy met on the set of Monstrance. So that was about the start of 2006. After that was finished, we started hanging around my studio and just kind of messing around with different production ideas and just being like inventive and just having fun doing music. I put some Light Thief EPs out on Ape with Andy. Andy was on a couple, 3 I think. And around this time, Jen also signed to Ape. So she sent her album to Andy to sort of finish up. They worked together on it. And I got to know Jen as well around the same, because we're both in the same situation, both worked with Andy. We all got on really well. So I then sent her some tracks me and Andy had been working on, and that kind of started the process. And then Jen came over. I played some gigs with her, played on bass, and we started working on her next album. And then she went back to America, and we had a load of bits and pieces left around on my hard drive, starts, ideas, where the 3 of us were just messing around in here. We thought we should form a band. We'd call it the Clubmen, which has since become the 3 Clubmen. It all got left for well, till lockdown, and then it was like one of them projects that everyone said when I played it, you should finish that. So I just thought, well, I got to go. That was my number one thing last year. I have to get, because I've played it to everyone who's come in this blooming place for the last 10 years, and they said, why haven't you finished it? And there's no real reason other than just getting on with other stuff. So yeah, so it's time to do it.
How much stuff are we talking about? Because there are 4 songs on the EP that's coming out quite soon. What else is there?
When we decided to do it, went through everything. There was possibly an album, but not as strong as these 4, really. So these 4 could be finished off. So I think that was what the decision was. It would be a strong EP and a patchy album that would have taken a long time to weld together. But there was lots of starting points. There was a lot of stuff going back and forth between Swindon and Albuquerque for a while. So it's all on my hard drive.
I'm intrigued by what you're saying, that you and Andy started working on material before you gave it to Jen. So is the genesis of all of these songs, is that where they all started, with you and Andy playing around with ideas?
Yeah, let's think. Aviatrix was done just before Jen came to her Swindon for her first kind of little tour and to meet Andy. Now, Race Car, the second track, that's got an unusual genesis in that there was on Monstrance, when that was recorded, I was kind of involved in the mixing and helping that over the line. I started very cheekily doing a remix of some of the Monstrance stuff, and found this very strange loop in 15/16 time on a track called Torturetainment that I chopped up and made a track out of it, and then sent it to Jen. She did a vocal on it, which was the vocal on Race Car. Then that came back to me and Andy. Andy said, well, why don't we rebuild the track? So he started playing the guitars that then became Race Car. So it's like back and forth, chopped up and rearranged. So it kind of sounds like a band playing it, but no one's ever recorded anything hearing what else is going on. It's sort of been botched together. But yeah, that's probably the oldest one. Grasshopper then came. That was kind of done, I think, when Jen was here, because that's her playing guitar on Grasshopper. She put the guitar riff down. Then Andy came up with the vocal line. And Look at Those Stars. That was Andy. He spent a lot of time messing around with Mellotron loops for a while. We did Gonwards together. And around that period of time, Andy really got into starting with these old Mellotron loops and then writing songs based on that. So that comes from Andy's sort of initial intro, and that sort of came down here. We put it onto my system. I added some bits, and then I think Jen had gone back to America by then. So then she sent the vocals over. And we only had a verse of that till about a year or so ago. That was like, because it was such a good kind of hook. But we need to finish that. So they all start 2009, 2010. Really, I suppose that's when they all kind of were born, and then they've been left to fend for themselves for 13 years.
And what's fascinating about that is that it sounds like there wasn't a sort of formula. It wasn't like one person started. It was like everybody, and it also suggests that they are genuine collaborations. It's not just somebody coming along and adding a few lyrics at the end. Everybody was involved all the way through.
Yeah, no, it was definitely back and forth between us. And I've always, obviously Andy is such a great songwriter. He tends to write songs with XTC where they have it all fully formed before he went into the studio. But with this, Andy's such a great improviser. He's really good at just coming up on stuff on the spur of the moment. So I've always recorded like that with people. It was back and forth between the three of us for quite a while, adding bits. And also because I had him on the system, I got this quite a few sort of local musicians who pop in and out to the studio all the time. So often I'd get them just to play some bits on top, just improvise some bits that I could then chop up, or took some other songs, just to try and make them into pieces of music rather than sketches. They were sketches, and it was just working out how to finish them, how to complete them. Just need a bit of time.
What surprises me slightly about that is that Jen's 2 albums, Warm Robot and the Breaks, her style involves a lot of loops and repetitions and so on, which seem to be very prevalent here as well. So it's almost like the two of you are moulding yourselves to her style, so that that particular approach can work. Or am I wrong in saying that?
The first thing I worked on her, I didn't actually work on Warm Robot. That's the first thing I heard of Jen was I used to go to Andy's, regularly when we were working on Monstrous, and after that, and he'd play me stuff people had sent him, and he played me this stuff. It was just really interesting and quite odd. I couldn't kind of understand because she does a lot of stuff in odd time signatures. But what we did at first, there was a track called Up on High, which on the first Light Thief EP I did with Andy, or the second one. And there was a big section in the middle, and I just basically gave Jen a big open section and said, could you do some kind of choir in there, and would just leave it open. Then she'd send back, I think she sent back 35 vocal harmonists for that. That was the first thing. So it took me about a year to mix it. And then that was really sort of, we'd kind of just leave, me and Andy would get something together and leave chunks for Jen to do what she felt like in a big gap, and then just send that back, and then we'd answer that. So it was like a back and forth across the internet. I don't think we never actually really sat in a room and jammed. I don't think ever. I'm not sure even if that would work. But it seemed to work like this, just back and forth, sketches, ideas. And yeah, I suppose Jen is really good at harmonies and layers. So just give her a space and she'll stack up these bits in there. And then, that's your verse. And then Andy would, we need a chorus. Andy would try and write a chorus, and then I'd put the bass on, or a bit of guitar. Andy play some guitar, keyboards, drum. We'd all have a go at drumming, me and Andy, and percussion. So yeah, we just had fun. It wasn't a serious project by any means, just a bit of fun.
And then all of you being receptive enough to each other's ideas, so that one would, if somebody, it wasn't like somebody was saying, "Oh no, that's a terrible idea." You were all just sort of accepting each other's ideas.
Yeah. I don't think anything ever got refused. Some of the tracks, some of the ones that haven't made the EP, they just don't work quite so well. They're a bit more abstract, and there's not more than we've never got to the next section. It's like you have the first section, you've got to find a B section that somehow fits with it, so you can get back to the A section. Trying to do stuff just totally improvised, make up on, but it doesn't always come up with anything usable. But I do think you can come up with some magic that way that you wouldn't have come up if you sort of spent ages trying to write the whole song yourself. So somewhere, I think, we've got in the middle of the three of us, which is quite an interesting place, I think. So, yeah. I'm really pleased with it.
I can imagine that you're in a position where you don't remember who did what, or where one idea came from. It's just because it's sort of organically created in many cases.
Yes, but files on the computer, they've been, there's so many layers and bits and pieces. It would all be uncoverable if I went back into the files. But there's, say, Aviatrix, the 2010 version, and 2014 version, and I've had another look at 2018 and then 2022, and each time they've sort of changed a bit. So yeah, I really can't remember who did what when, but not in the order anyway. But they've kind of evolved organically. I think that was the best way to think of it.
And I suppose one of the lovely things about the collaboration is that Andy Partridge is, as we know, a very distinctive songwriter and a distinctive singer, and so is Jen, but they seem to mesh together so perfectly with you somewhere in the middle, I guess. It seems to be a very productive collaboration from that point of view, very right collaboration.
Yeah, they're both very, very distinctive tones, but they blend together really, really, really nicely. The couple of times on the EP when the voices harmonise with each other, I think it works really, really well. And then you've got Andy's guitar style against Jen's voice, and Jen's guitar style against Andy's voice. So yeah, it's a really interesting combination. Andy obviously likes Jen's voice because he signed her to Ape. So I think there's a connection in the voice. And then you've got things where it's got Jen's voice and Andy's guitar, then Jen's guitar and Andy's voice. And me, I'm sort of banging noises in the background and playing bass and, jollying the whole thing along. But it's a nice combination of their two tones, I think.
I can't understand why Jen Olive isn't as big as, any of the distinctive pop voices of our time. I think she's just a remarkable talent, and yet seems to be completely undiscovered.
Yeah, I don't know either, really. There's a certain game you've got to play, I think, to get someone. That's sort of like touring, gigging, being very active. And I think we're all actually, one of the things about this, we're all fairly reclusive characters.
Yes.
You know, and Andy famously, so I'm not exactly one for the, I kind of like being down in the studio with people, you know, in the dark. And Jen is very much like she's in Albuquerque in the desert, and none of us are particularly actually out gigging. So I think you got to play that game a little bit to do it. And I don't think any of us have ever done that. We're not going to gig. There's no doubt about that. We're not going to be gigging. So yeah, I think we're just off the radar a bit. Hopefully people will hear this, and you know, there should be we'll see. I think people will like it. I hope people will like it.
Do you know that thing people often say, oh, who's the most underrated musician? And, you know, XTC are often talked about as underrated, but actually people do know about XTC. In the case of Jen Olive, I don't think people even know about her. I think I mean, she's genuinely underrated. She's genuinely unknown for someone who's as fantastic as she is.
You know, one of the reasons I wanted to do this was sort of like to draw attention to, you know, to Jen, and well, I think this is Andy doing pop that he's maybe not done in a while. I did Monstrance with Andy. I wasn't involved. I was only helped with the sort of mixing and that. Then we worked on Gonwards a lot together. This is Andy and a different guys than maybe he's been in for a while.
Yeah, because obviously with Andy, you can only associate him with an XTC. That's not surprising. But then he's sort of felt reluctant to call himself a solo artist, but then hasn't. And then has done a few things in collaboration with other people, and Monstrance being a prime example of that. And then this, and it's interesting for someone who is so talented that he does still like that input from other people. He sees himself as a musician who's part of a band, or you know, part of a collaboration, and not somebody who's going out on his own in a sort of, I don't know, whatever David Bowie sort of mold.
I think it's just, I mean, I can't speak for Andy, of course, but I just think personally, it's just more fun doing it with someone else. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just the whole point of actually playing music and just bouncing off some, what about this and what about that? You know, and is really, I think, at his best in a room with people coming up with, you know, brilliant musical ideas. And the thing with technology now, everyone can do it on their own. You can sit in a room and do everything yourself, but it's not really much fun. I don't think. You know what I mean? No one's laughing. You can't laugh at your own gags, and you know, your own playing bores the hell out of you. And you know, I've done this before. So when you work with someone else, someone's going to come on, especially with people like Andy and Jen involved. You're going to get people bringing in ideas. Whoa, where's that come from? It's that sideways stuff that I've always really, really liked. Trying to bolt things together that should not bolt together. I did some work with a band called the Future Sound of London. And before I worked with them, I was very kind of traditional guitar, sort of blues, rock guitar, you know, hints of jazz, but just, you know, just played guitar really and bass. And through them, I just sort of sampling, by chopping that up and reversing that and putting that next to that, you come up with something that no one would have actually come up with. It's not coming out of anyone's sort of experience. It's something you've created, something new. So that's kind of, I suppose that's what I brought to it.
I'm just thinking, because you just asked me what I thought of the EP, and it is exactly that combination that you're describing, which is the reason for being an XTC fan as well, which is that you, although it doesn't particularly sound like XTC, what it does sound like is that really fascinating combination of melody. And you were just describing how fantastic Jen does her backing vocals and harmonies and all of that kind of stuff. So you've got those beautiful tunes, but at the same time you've got, to take Race Car as a prime example, you've got the sort of choppy guitars and something that sounds like it might have come off a Captain Beefheart record, or you know, you've got those other roots and other collisions of ideas and thoughts which just keep it real, and rhythms that keep it really interesting all the time.
Yeah, I think I think that's the thing. Is it interesting? You know, does it work? Is it interesting? And there's all kinds of reference. But there is definitely Beefheart in Andy's guitars and Race Car is definitely him doing his clanging Beefheart dissonance. That's great. But then the end is basically life on Mars. That's how it ends. There's all kinds of references in there that I can hear. It's a sort of a journey through the what we like, I suppose. Everyone's just, having fun. And it's nice to be doing something without any pressure of no label, no, just to just do it for the sheer art of it, the fun of making music.
I think we should talk a little bit more about you, and you just described yourself as being reclusive and liking being behind the scenes. But for XTC fans listening to this podcast, they might not be aware about exactly how many fingers you've had in how many XTC related pies. You've worked with, I think, I'm not too sure whether you've worked with Dave Gregory, but you've certainly worked with Barry Andrews, with Andy Partridge, with Colin Moulding, with Terry Chambers, and indeed with Holly Partridge in the She Beats, and that gives you pretty good XTC credibility. You people will know who were able to get hold of the Naked Flames live TCNI album. That's another thing that you were involved in mixing. I can remember seeing you at the back of the Art Centre in Swindon at the desk there, and you seem to be connected to every other musician. Have I mentioned, and also Peter Blegvad and Andy Partridge with Gone Words as well. It's a fantastic, I suppose, an unsung contribution to the post XTC canon, but. I don't know whether you find them all fertile people to work with.
Well, I've actually got the full set. I did work with Dave. I think I helped master the first Tin Spirits album. A friend of mine, Mitch, produced it. So I was very, very, very minor involvement in that. So I moved to Swindon in 1990. So I didn't 89, I think. So I kind of missed XTC by the time I'd arrived here. They'd done their local gigs. I never saw them growing up. And then when I was just involved in local music at a record shop, Andy came in the record shop once in about 1993, and I tried to sell him a Charlie Parker album, but he wouldn't have it. I don't know if he remembers that. And then I just carried on doing music around Swindon, all kinds of projects, and got this Lighter Thief thing that was kind of me just doing this with any interesting person I found in Swindon. I just wanted to make records with them. So I just recorded. I suppose it's inevitable then that I ended up working with Andy and Barry. So what happened? I run a music production course at a college. I've been doing for like 20 years. And we got a studio there. So when they were looking to record Monstrance, they found the studio. They wanted a local studio. So that's where I met them when they came in on the first day to record that. Andy had a noisy wah-wah pedal, so I managed to find him a quiet wah-wah pedal. That was our opening discussion, and then I think Barry asked me to help produce the Glory Bumps album for Streetback, and then I worked with Barry for the next 4 or 5 Streetback albums until quite recently. Dave, then the She Beats came along. My son was in a band called the Alphons, and they went on tour with the She Beats, so I got to know them. So I did some demos with the She Beats and did some stuff with Holly. But hundreds of other musicians in Swindon as well. So I mastered the Tin Spirits album about 2012-13 maybe, and then the next thing was when Colin and Terry got together and asked me to firstly get involved with help him mix the EP, and then I was asked to sort of help run organise the Arts Centre gig. Even to the point of suggesting the Arts Centre as a venue, and they were really great shows. I thought really kind of moving and warm, and I'm sure a lot of people who listened to were there. It was really, really great. Really, really great. One thing I'm too proud of, I suggested do a piano version of something, and then Colin came out with Bungalow, and I thought that was one of the highlights of the show, actually.
It was, yeah. That was, grown men were seen to cry.
yeah. I didn't suggest Bungalow, but I'd done a gig there myself, and I said, it really works well in there if you just take at least one song just down to nothing. And then he said, what about Bungalow? It's like perfect, wasn't it? It was just really, 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 really worked. Then after I helped mix it, I've done a little bit of work with Terry on the helped with Terry and Steve on the the XTC stuff as well. So I think I've just it's not just XTC, but because I'm in Swindon and I'm very cheap. People, people come. I tend to just like working with interesting people, and they're all, you know, not that I could do a psychological analysis of all of them, but they're all very, very interesting people, aren't they? You know, fascinating. And I think working with Andy gave me, you know, some kind of credence, I suppose, within the sort of the XTC following, you know, groups, whatever. So that, you know.
I'm wondering as well as, I mean, I suppose there's your musical contribution, but also there must be something about your, I don't know, your personality, which means that people, you know, musicians, there are a lot of egos involved, and you know, people can fall out with each other. But you've managed to be, as we've clearly just seen, at the centre of the whole XTC universe, really, in recent years, and presumably that's because you're good at getting on with people.
I've enjoyed doing music with all of them. They're all fantastic musicians, and that's the other thing I've sort of found, because I've been in Swindon for like 23 years now, and I've seen so many local bands and so many young bands come up. But to think you've got like 4 or 5 people with that talent all somehow got together in the early 70s in a small town. This is a small town. There's some brilliant musicians around, but there's not brilliant musicians in groups of 4 or 5, if you know what I mean. And that's what they're all so different, but they're all so good in their own right. You know, it's unusual, and you know.
Yeah, no, that's right. And so many of these things are down to synchronicity, isn't it? And just being in the right place at the right time. And you know, what if Paul McCartney hadn't bumped into John Lennon? You know, the world would be a different place.
That's right. Who knows what all of them have done on their own? But I think they all would have done something musically. They all would have found their way of doing their own music. The fact that they got together, you know, that really did. No one. This is a small town. No one really has come anywhere near to their kind of level of success since them, not as a band anyway. So
since Diana Dawes.
Yeah.
But and I suppose you must have seen that your entry point with Andy and Barry and Monstrance, that you know, that was a collaboration that nobody expected after their long history of Barry really only being in XCC for a very short period of time, but sort of creating their sound early on. But again, you listen to Monstrance and you hear how, in a way, like-minded they are in the sense that they're both creative people who can improvise alongside each other and create really interesting stuff.
I think there's a real mutual respect between all of them, actually, for what they've gone. I mean, that Monstrance wasn't going to last longer than that, but it was. Yeah, I think Andy at that point was trying to get. I mean, he'll you know, I don't think he said it himself. So I don't put words in himself. He was trying to get away from writing songs. He wanted to do something improvised, and he bumped into Barry, and I think that just. I think it was a. Yeah, I think that was Andy trying to get away from from the song and going somewhere else. And since when he's come back round again, but interesting stuff. Not for the faint-hearted, Monstrance. I think you'll agree.
Well, yeah, because it's the nature of it. I mean, even compiling it must have been a huge job, because it was just lots of improvisation, wasn't it?
Oh, there was hours of the stuff, hours and hours of the stuff, and a scenario with noisy record. Oh, it was a long. Probably the tale of Monstrance is probably for another time.
Yeah. Oh, I'll have to come back.
That's a long story, that one. But that was how I met Andy. So from that point, and therefore that's how I met Jen, and it opened up this whole new kind of way. And therefore, once I met them, I met Colin and Barry and everyone. So it was, it was an interesting time, that.
As somebody who's contributing to this whole process, you're sometimes billed as a mixer, you're sometimes billed as a producer, you're sometimes billed as a bassist and a keyboard player and a guitar player. Is there do all of those jobs sort of morph into each other, or do you see them as sort of distinct jobs? I mean, particularly I'm thinking about something like mixing and producing to the layman, and that distinction between an engineer, a producer, and a mixing desk operator. That there's a continuum there, at least, I think. Are they all part of the same job to you?
Well, yeah, I come from being a musician. I come from playing guitar. And then sort of bass, and then I got into the technology from like working this band, the Future Sound London. I thought, I can do this with computers, and it was like a light bulb went on. Now Andy came from the more traditional route in the studio, where like microphones and desks. I don't come from that way at all. I learned on computers, so me and Andy kind of met in the middle. I was coming from more sampling kind of way. He was coming from a traditional way. But I think the best description of a producer you can have, which I suppose I am, is that you've got to be the blank card in Scrabble. So if you need someone to play the bass, we'll pick up the bass. If you need someone to help with the lyrics, we'll get the pen out and work with them. If you need the harmonies, get on to work out what notes someone can sing. So I'm not really very good at anything, but I'm quite good at lots of things. I'm not a great engineer. I'm not a great mixer. I'm not a great guitar, but I can sort of have a go at lots of different things. And I think that's the skill, an all-round skill, rather than us say, like virtuoso guitarist, which I'm not at all.
And am I right in thinking with the three Clubmen, you are all of those things in particular? I mean, it seems to be like pushing all of your skills in.
Yeah, that's what I like it. That's what all the I tend to do. I've in fact, about a year ago, last summer, I stopped doing everything for other people. So I'm just going to do stuff that I really want to do now. What should I do? I need to finish the three Clubmen. So that was almost like a stop doing. Because a lot of stuff, you're mixing stuff or producing stuff you don't really like, and it comes just. So I'm just trying. I only want to do stuff now I love. So involved in every aspect of it. Not singing, unfortunately. I never really pushed myself on that. But I just like making things, like making music with people. I think I like people. It's the people I like, and trying to capture them in a way that they sound great, and everyone else thinks, it's a magic. I've never managed to do it on any kind of successful level, but that's the joy in making a great record. You just capture some brilliant people in a room at that point. I mean, it's a fascinating subject, because you see a really great band. We hear a great record, but you see that band played, and it's never the same as that one day where it's just right. It's a moment in time, a record.
I'm wondering as well, in terms of taste. It's I know that you were just saying that you started off as selling records and presumably therefore being exposed to a huge amount of music and a huge range of music. Do you have very broad tastes, or is this the kind is this the stuff that we've just been talking about? Is that your kind of music, or are you sort of moving into unfamiliar territory?
I've always been interested in how it works. So like chords and from the theories, and then how actually different genres are constructed. So what was good about having a record shop, that everyone who came in was an expert on their genre. So I'd be just talking to somebody about early ska, and then some old jazz, and then someone who's into early 90s hip hop. So bits of all of it is interesting, and I sort of carried on with the production. So because of my teaching work, some kid will say, how do you get that drum sound off so and so? And I said, well, I've absolutely no idea, but then I'll go on the internet and research it, and before I know it, I've gone down that rabbit hole for like you say, recognise the beef art. Well, I've had a beef art stage, and then there's every genre there's possibly. I've had a go at trying to unpack it. Really, how does that work? Why does that rhythm sound like that, and why does that sound like that? And obviously, Andy's got a great understanding of all that, a fantastic understanding of music in different genres and how chords work together. Very good at that. Really good at that. Structures. The first time we went out, we sat in a pub, and every record comes on a jukebox. He'll say, listen to the reverb, listen to that. And we just unpick music. So it was really great. So the first few years of Andy, from sort of Monstrance onwards up to Gonwards, and probably the 10 years, he'd come down at least one day a week, often two. We just sit, make music, but then listen to music and try and unpick it. Why is this so good? Listen to that snare sound. What's that chord there? And just then make each other laugh, and then go to the pub. That was it was an absolute education. Well, let's talk about it in the past. It's been absolute education in how music works. Really, from the mind of Andy Partridge, which obviously is different than other people they see
Everybody
it.
else's mind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's been good. It's been good.
And it's that open-mindedness that impresses me. Not actually, I mean, yes, with all of the members of XTC, but also with someone like Stephen Wilson. You know, people who might be ploughing a particular furrow, but when you start talking to them as musicians, you realise that they have listened and absorbed other furrows as well, and they've maintained their creativity, I suppose, because they are not shutting doors. They are saying, well, you know, maybe we could do a bit of funk, maybe we could do a bit of disco, maybe we could do a bit of heavy metal or whatever, but they're not ruling anything out. Whereas, I don't know, I suppose I find that interesting because of the age I am. Really, it was you know, when I was at school, you were either a rocker or you were into new wave or somewhere. It didn't you weren't really allowed to have tastes feet in both camps, but that seems to be very uncreative and much more productive to keep yourself open to other possibilities.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Yes, talking about Stephen Wilson, he's of a similar sort of mind. Really, he's up for anything. He's open to any ideas. I've met him a few times listening to the surround sound mixes. Yeah, very open, very very. Yeah, and you're right. It was you were in the 70s when I was. You in your little tribes, weren't you? Weren't allowed to listen to anything else. I don't think that's like that anymore at all. Actually, I think that's one good thing of the internet. Everyone just picks their own little avenue now, and it can be. Yeah, when I first used to start records, certain people would only buy, say, rockabilly records, or only buy ska records from 1963 to and it just seems so restrictive. Really, I don't get it. I just like bits of everything. Little bits of everything.
Yes, I mean, I also think it the other way around, that if you were in, I don't know, a country and western band or a reggae band, and you might be fantastic, but I think I would just get a bit bored. You think, well, can't we play something else? Can't we do some other thing? And one of the nice things about XEC is that you can't categorize them. You can't put them in one genre or another genre. They're just music.
Yeah, that's their strength. It's just that middle ground. It makes it harder to market, I think. I think for record companies, I like to say, oh, this band's like this. I think it's very hard if you sit in the middle. What on earth is this? And maybe that's why they're not as successful as they should have been. Because it didn't kind of fit anywhere you could put a name on it.
And if you could, it would be different the next time round. And you.
Yeah. So it does make it very difficult to market. But I think the really great musicians of our time, the people like Miles Davis and people like that, they would just move forward. Every time they would annoy the people who they'd just left behind on the last one, but that didn't stop them trying new stuff. So the best musicians just do music. They don't get stuck in a genre. That happens to be the genre they start with, because that's what they learned when they were teenagers. But after that, it's all open, isn't it? It's all open.
And thinking about sitting alongside Andy Partridge and Jen Olive at different times, or whether you're doing it over the internet, what's it like when one or other of them comes up with an idea? Did they surprise you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I just, there's a lot of wow moments. Wow, where did that come from? With Andy, often I've actually been in the room where he'll grab a guitar and he's, his mind's working so fast. It's hard to keep up sometimes. But I've learned, sometimes he'll be saying, and I kind of know what he's thinking now because we've spent so long sat next to each other. Me and Jen haven't spent that much time actually making music in the room. We did a fair bit on her album, The Breaks. A lot of that was done here. I think Jen's got her own system of layering. I don't know how she does it. Because there's chords. She sings chords that I didn't know existed. It's just like someone's played all the notes on a piano all at the same time, sung all of them, but somehow it sounds all right. I don't know. I've tried to work out there's a thing she sings in Look at These Stars. There's a note in the chorus she sings, and she sings two notes in a harmony, which they do go together. Very odd to put these two notes together in a harmony, but she seems to just be able to pull these things off. It's really good at that.
Yeah, beautiful quality to it then as well. And when you're mixing, I think her vocals in particular, when you're mixing that, is it what problems does it or joy does it give you to make those combinations work so that the backing vocals aren't too loud, or the mix with everything. You can hear it all, because there's so much material. Actually, it's the same problem with XTC. There's too many ideas.
This is why it's taken so long. This is why it's taken, because I've been going in there tweaking these vocals. I mean, Jen layers them, they kind of work. She's worked it out in her head, but still there's so many options. How high do you have the last one? And for something race car, there's all these different parts. And main problem was to make sure that one wasn't louder than the other, so it's kind of sounds all balanced. And then Andy's guitars have to, and I'm quite sort of disorganized and messy, so it takes a long time to kind of get it all sitting up, till it's actually, I think that's about done really. But there's no kind of process other than sort of almost like move. It's almost like the bits of collage, bits of sound collage are moving around till that's perfect. And I don't know why, that just has to be at that volume. Andy said something about this. It's like we're all throwing paint at a canvas, the three of us. That's sort of the musical thing. And then we go in there, we throw paint, and then we go back and have a look. Is there anything in the forest of noise that, that's good. I like that. That's the process, I think. It's like all throwing our own colours in and then trying to merge it together afterwards. Just as that was the bit I've probably done more of that side of it, but they've been more of the front end of it.
And then because Andy's got such a precise ear for music, is he a hard taskmaster to work for when from the production and mixing side? Are you coming back and is he giving very precise, detailed feedback about what you've come up with?
Oh, absolutely. Andy's got amazing ears. He can hear stuff that, and it's been great training for me, because when I can remember thinking about 2005 that I was getting better at production, but they never sounded very good really. I knew they didn't sound very good because I was making on such shoddy equipment in a room in the house. I hadn't built the studio then, and I was just sort of learning how to do it. And then I remember thinking, if only I can meet somebody who's really good with compression and EQ and reverb. And then almost within weeks, I bumped into Andy, and he would just gave me this education in mixing from his perspective, what he'd learnt by sat next to all these great mixers. But I think I've learned he's got certain techniques, he likes certain sounds. I don't agree. We don't agree on lots of things. I would have a different sort of thoughts on EQ, but we do agree on an awful lot as well. What sounds good, and he'll just, when we were working on Gonwards, he'd spend, one of the things he said, he wanted to try every compressor I had on Peter Blegbad's voice. So we just went through, he'll go to such detail, and it's been really good for me because I'm actually quite slapdash. And so he's kind of made me a bit more systematic in my production, shall we say. That's been good.
But I imagine in that situation you can just be overwhelmed with choice, and I'm thinking of Todd Rundgren's approach, which was, as some might say, is a bit more slapdash, but his line would be, the average listener can't tell whether it's this compressor or that compressor, and it's got to sound like one thing, so let's just do this and move on. Are you attracted to that way of thinking?
If I'm sort of left to my own device, I'll just kind of go on instinct. But what has been great with working with Andy is that we have done that. It's always really enjoyable because we'll go in. It'd be like, I would love to spend time on work and understand more about compressors. So when Andy's here, that's what we can do. And I kind of, by the end of it, I'm further ahead with my understanding. So just working with someone really, really with good ears and really, really good understanding of the old technology rather than the new technology. That was great, because I didn't understand that. I knew the new technology, not the old technology. So we kind of met. Like I said, we met in the middle, and had some, and just we laughed a lot. Really, the whole thing's been very funny. The whole thing. There's characters involved. There's all these characters we invent, and Gonwards was very funny. It's all been funny. It's all been funny.
I imagine Blegbad is very. I've never met him, but I presume that he's a very funny person.
Oh, very droll. Yes. I pick Andy up at 11. Pick Peter up from the train station at 11:30, and we come back and also. Andy's a real creature of habit. I'm a real creature of habit. We'd always have lunch exactly the same time of the day. We'd finish at 5 and go to the Los Gatos or the Roaring Donkey. It was like a traditional working day, like lunch and coffee and chatting, and then back to work. So yeah, I've learned a lot of that. But yeah, just hilarious company. Very, very witty, very funny man, Peter Blegfast.
Yeah.
Very funny.
Yeah. So one final question then, I guess. What are your hopes for the three Clubmen? Is this going to be the beginning and the end of it, although a rather delayed beginning of it, but or might more happen?
I think we'll have to wait and see how it goes, because there is more. We could do more. What has made me realise is, I'm going to carry on doing stuff as a label myself. Andy asked me to put this out myself, which I'm doing, and I'm kind of, it's good. He's forced me into setting up what I do as a label. So I just I'll put something else next. Might be another Three Clubmen thing, might be some other project that I've got hanging around on my hard drive. Don't know. I'll often have 17 simultaneous projects on the go. So I'm trying to do one. I think that's why it's getting finished, because I'm just, for once in my life, going to do one project, which is the Three Clubmen, till it's bloody done. I just hope people like it. Really, that's. I know not everyone will, obviously not, but yeah, I think there's enough in it that people say, they can hear that it was a good project to do, good to finish.
Yeah,
but we'll see.
I'm one of them. You've got one fan at least.
Oh, that's good. That's great. That's good. That'll do.
Great. Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for doing this, Mark. It's really been really good.
Thank you. Thank you for recording. Thank you for finally getting it out.
Yeah, it's been nice. I've wanted to talk. I've sort of known that. I've been around the XTC, like say, camp for a long while, and it's kind of good to talk about it all, actually, because it's been real interesting.
What do you call that noise?
Thanks very much again to Stu Rowe. There's more of that kind of thing coming up from Jen Olive and Andy Partridge in the next 2 episodes, and you can order the Three Clubmen EP from burningshed.com. Thank you once again to everyone who has supported the podcast on Patreon, who you can join at patreon.com/Mark Fisher. And thanks in particular to the following Knights in Shining Karma: Terry Arnott, John Bicknell, Kevin Burt, Lorenzo Chachi, Cale Corbett, Liam Duggan, Jamie Dunn, Jeff Farris, Leslie Gooch, Mike Grafe, Robert Graham, Stephen Hope, Alan Hughes, Marek Kraus, Jesper Kumberg, Robert Lawlaw, Dennis LeCourrier, Liz Lynch, Murray Meikle, Yusuf Murrah, Karen Neal, Jeff Nicholson, Amy Parkinson, Mark Reed, James Reimer, Simon Slatehome, Michael Sutcliffe, Mark Thomas, Nigel Waller, and Martin Whitley. Great to have you all on board, and I'll be back next week with another ridiculous tie knot.